I never thought that sharing a home with my father-in-law would lead to something that would change how I saw everything around me. But one evening, something shifted. Not in any dramatic way, but in the quiet, heavy silence between two people who had never really spoken beyond politeness. Let me take you back. That evening felt no different from the others, till he arrived. Michael, my wife, Emily's father. He wasn't a stranger, but he was hardly around either. His work kept him stationed out of state, and even when he visited, he was more of a guest than family. Polite, distant, present, but never truly here. But something about tonight was different, maybe. It was the way he paused at the door after Emily let him in. His hand resting on the frame like crossing into the house meant more than it usually did. Or maybe it was the way he looked at me, steady, quiet, but focused, not polite, not casual, just present. "Alex," he said with that gruff warmth in his voice. "Thanks for letting me stay, of course," I replied. "You're always welcome here." But even as I said it, I felt something odd in my chest. Not discomfort, something else. Like a question I wasn't sure how to ask. "My name's Alex, 36. Married to Emily for over a decade. 2 kids, 1 dog. A home tucked into the quiet woods of Oregon where life from the outside looked peaceful. But inside, something had drifted. I wasn't unhappy. Not exactly. Just restless. Like I was living my life half an inch removed from it. I'd never told Emily. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't have the words. How do you explain a numbness you don't fully understand? So maybe that's why I noticed Michael more than I should have. The way he carried himself, calm, collected, his silver hair neatly styled, his coat tailored. He looked ... sharp, like time hadn't caught up to him yet. Over dinner, Emily caught him up on the kids. I stayed quiet, sipping my wine, watching him quietly. And I couldn't help noticing he looked at me more than usual, not awkwardly, not accusingly, just watching, like he was trying to figure me out. After the kids went to bed, the 3 of us sat in the living room. Emily curled up beside her father. I sat across from them, near the fire. It cast soft shadows on the ceiling, and our voices dropped with the light. The conversation faded. And yet that silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It felt thick, loaded, like we were both standing at the edge of something we didn't name. Eventually, Emily yawned and stood. "You coming?" she asked as she headed up the stairs. "In a bit," I said. She smiled and disappeared. The house felt quieter than it should have. Michael and I didn't speak right away. He stared at the fire for a long time before finally saying, "You've got a beautiful home." "Thanks," I replied, unsure why it made my chest tighten. Then he asked, "Do you ever feel out of place, even when everything seems perfect?" I turned to him, surprised. "More often than I'd like to admit." He nodded slowly. "I see it in you. Like you're carrying something you never put down." I didn't know what to say. His words hit somewhere deep. "What about you?" I asked. "What do you see in yourself?" He finally looked at me, not just glanced, but really looked. A man who's kept too much inside for too long. We didn't speak after that. Something had already been said. The room felt different. Heavy, yes, but not dark. It's just real. Eventually, Michael stood to leave. I expected him to just go quietly, but he paused behind my chair. "Good night." "Alex," he said, soft but firm. "Good night," I managed, my throat tight. He walked away, his footsteps steady. I sat there long after he was gone, staring into the fire, unsure why my heart was racing, but deep down I knew. Something had shifted, and there was no undoing it. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. The way he carried himself, composed, always certain, was unsettling. And I hated how much I admired that about him. It wasn't just confidence. It was like he saw through people and somehow didn't judge them for it. I turned back to the sink, hoping the silence would stretch long enough to dissolve the strange tension building between us. But then I heard the soft scrape of his chair against the kitchen tiles. He was standing now. My chest tightened. Moments later, I could feel him behind me again, closer this time. It's not close enough to touch, but just enough to feel the shift. In the air, "You always keep the windows open this early?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Helps the air feel less stale?" I managed. "It's peaceful here. Quiet." I didn't answer. My hand gripped the edge of the sink tighter than I intended. He took another small step closer. "Emily's lucky," he said. "You take care of her, the kids, the house?" I turned just slightly, catching a glimpse of him over my shoulder. His eyes met mine, steady, unreadable. Something flickered in them. "Try," I said quietly. The moment stretched, heavy and uncertain. Neither of us moved, neither of us spoke. Then his gaze dropped for a second, a brief glance downward, quickly returning to my eyes. Subtle, but I noticed, felt it. The silence between us grew louder. My breathing quickened, and I hated that he could see that. Hated that part of me didn't care. Then, as suddenly as the moment built, it fractured. He stepped back. "Oh, wow," he said, clearing his throat. "I'll give you some space." I didn't mean to linger. "No, it's fine," I replied too quickly. But he was already walking away, his footsteps steady as he disappeared down the hallway. I stayed at the sink, hands still frozen, heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. What was that? Whatever it wasn't innocent. That morning changed something in me. It wasn't just how he looked at MIT, it was how I looked back. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't want to feel invisible anymore. The rest of the day passed. In a blur, the kids came home from school, loud and chaotic as ever. Emily got home an hour later, arms full of groceries and stories from work. We cooked dinner together. Michael sat at the kitchen island, quiet, occasionally chiming in, watching. I tried not to look at him. Tried not to notice how often his gaze returned to me when no one else was paying attention. Tried not to replay the moment in the kitchen. That evening, Emily suggested a walk. "Want to come?" she asked, placing her hand on my shoulder. I faked a yawn. "I think I'll stay back tonight. Maybe sit on the porch for a while." She didn't think much of it. She kissed me, bundled up the kids, and headed out. Michael stood by the window, watching them disappear into the trees. Then he turned. "Mind if I step out too?" I shrugged. "You don't need my permission?" He nodded once and stepped outside. A few minutes passed. I followed. The air outside was cool and quiet. The forest wrapped us in stillness. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in soft orange and purple. I walked without direction, but my feet led me to the pond, a small clearing behind the tree line. A bench sat by the water, old and warped. Emily and I used to come here years ago when life still felt simple, but I hadn't been back in a long time, and somehow Michael had found it. He was already seated, still composed. The pond reflected his silhouette, stretching long across the surface. When he heard my footsteps, he turned his head slowly. "I hope you don't mind," he said. I shook my head and walked over, each step louder than I intended. I sat beside him, leaving a respectable space between us. "It's beautiful here," he said quietly. "Didn't think this place would be so peaceful." "That's why I like it," I replied. "You can sit here and forget the world exists." At me then really looked, and I realized how tired he seemed. Not from lack of sleep, but from years of carrying something too heavy. "I've never envied anyone," he said after a long silence. "Not really. But watching your life, your family, it makes me wonder what I missed." Oh, I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. The silence between us stretched again. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was something deeper, like an unspoken understanding. He shifted slightly. Just a small movement, but it caught my attention. "I keep thinking about this morning," he said suddenly. "That moment in the kitchen?" My breath caught. I stared down at my hands. "I didn't mean to make things complicated," I said. "I just ... didn't expect to feel anything." Michael turned toward me slightly. "What do you feel now?" I looked up. In his eyes I saw a quiet intensity, not longing, not temptation, but a deep searching connection. It unnerved me, but it didn't feel wrong. "I don't know," I admitted. I just know I don't want to keep pretending I'm okay. We didn't touch. We didn't cross any lines. But we sat shoulder to shoulder as night settled in, wrapped in silence that said more than words could. By the time we returned to the house, the kids were asleep, and Emily was reading in bed. I kissed her goodnight and climbed in beside her. But my mind stayed by the pond, stuck in a moment that wasn't about infidelity or desire. It was about feeling seen. The days that followed were a balancing act. Every moment with Michael was cautious. Every moment with Emily tinged with guilt. Michael stayed longer than expected. Emily welcomed it. The kids adored him. I kept my emotions guarded, trying to believe I could bury whatever had surfaced. That Friday, Emily was called in for a late shift. One of her coworkers had an emergency. We'll probably just watch a movie, I told her, trying to sound normal. Nothing exciting. She kissed me goodbye. She trusted me, trusted him. That made it worse. After the kids went to bed, I found Michael in the living room, staring out the window into the dark trees. The TV was on, but the volume was low. I stood in the doorway watching him. He looked like he was holding something in. I made tea, I said. He turned, gave a faint smile. Thank you. We sat on opposite sides of the couch. The show played to no one. The silence between us was filled with things we couldn't say. Eventually, I set my mug down. Can't keep doing this, I said. My voice strained. Michael nodded slowly. I know, but I can't stop thinking about it. Neither can I. We didn't move closer. We didn't say what we were really feeling. We just stared at the space between us, unsure if it would ever shrink. If I stay here any longer, he said softly, I might make a mistake I can't take back. I looked at him. There was no fear in his eyes, only truth. Maybe I said the real mistake would be pretending nothing's wrong. He exhaled, slowly. Then we stood, together. Nothing was said. But everything had already changed, and deep down we both knew we had to find our own way forward. One built not on silence, but on truth, even if it hurt, even if it meant walking away. He didn't say a word, but it felt like the entire evening had been building toward this one inevitable moment. We walked together to the guest bedroom. The door clicked softly shut behind us. He reached over and dimmed the lamp, casting the room in a warm amber glow. I stood still, unsure if this was bravery or madness. Unsure if I was finally stepping into who I was or destroying everything I'd built. Michael approached slowly, calm, intentional. His hand reached up, fingers grazing my jaw. I closed my eyes and let the touch settle into my skin like heat. His touch wasn't rough or aggressive. It was careful. Reverent. When he kissed me, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't lust. It was deliberate, like he was asking for permission with every breath. And I gave it fully, completely. I kissed him back, letting go of every reason I'd told myself not to. My hand slid to his chest, steady beneath his shirt. I felt the strength in his arms, the shift in his breathing when I touched him. Clothes fell away slowly, like we were peeling off fear itself, one layer at a time. He was older than me, but none of that mattered. His body felt real, grounded, familiar in a way that took me by surprise. He guided me to the bed, never breaking eye contact. When I lay down, he followed, careful but confident. His touch wasn't about claiming. It was about understanding, like he'd waited years to see me this way. There was no rush, no chaos, just warmth, breath, connection. Every touch felt like a silent promise. Every kiss was a letting go, and when we were fully together, it was like a storm breaking quiet and unstoppable. He moved with intention but never force, and I responded, not from desire alone, but something far more dangerous, trust. I let him in. He let me unravel, and it was enough to change everything. Afterward, we lay side by side in silence, our hands barely touching, hearts racing in sync. I turned to look at him. His eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling, but I knew he felt it to whatever line we'd crossed. It was far behind us now. I should have felt guilt, regret, panic, but all I felt was the quiet truth that I'd finally done. Something I couldn't lie to myself about. That silence the closeness sit was more honest than anything I'd felt in years, and I knew there was no turning back. The next morning came too fast. I woke to the faint sound of birds and early, gray light spilling through the blinds. The sheets around me still held the heat of what had happened, but Michael was gone. His side of the bed was empty. But the imprint remained. In the sheets, on my skin. I sat up, my heart already racing. The house was too quiet. Then I remembered Emily was off today. The kids were still sleeping. Any wrong move, any sound, and it would all come crashing down. My clothes were folded neatly at the edge of the bed. My shirt still carried his scent. As I stepped into the hallway, I could hear Emily's voice soft, distant from the kitchen. She was making breakfast, smiling, completely unaware that her husband had just spent the night with her father. I paused, catching my reflection in the hallway mirror. My eyes looked hollow. I didn't recognize myself anymore. By the time I entered the kitchen, Emily had 2 plates ready, the pan still sizzling on the stove. She turned and smiled. "You look tired," she teased playfully. "Rough night." It forced a chuckle. It caught in my throat. "Yeah, couldn't sleep." She didn't catch the lore. Maybe she didn't want to. "Dad stepped out early," she added, flipping a pancake. "Said he needed fresh air." I nodded. Yeah, that sounds like him. But the guilt was unbearable. Every time she looked at me with love in her eyes, it felt like another blade. In my chest, I smiled where I had to. I kissed her when she leaned in, but all I felt was the weight of what I was hiding. And still, I wasn't sorry. That was the worst part. Later that day, I found Michael outside near the woods, leaning against a tree with a cigarette. He didn't turn when I approached, but he knew I was there. "We can't stay here," he said quietly. "Not like this." "I know," I replied. "It'll destroy her." He finally turned to me. "I never meant to hurt her." "Me neither," I whispered. "But it's too late for that, isn't it?" I wanted to say no, that maybe we could stop. Maybe we hadn't gone far enough to ruin everything. But I couldn't say it, because I knew if he had reached for me in that moment, I would have gone to him again. No hesitation. That night, Emily planned a small dinner, just the 3 of us. Candles, wine, comfort. She was trying to make us feel like a family again. I sat across from her, Michael beside her. We managed to keep the illusion alive. The surface, the air pulsed with tension. Every glance Michael and I exchanged was loaded. Every word felt sharp. After dinner, Emily started cleaning. I tried to help, but my hands were shaking too much. I excused myself and went upstairs. Locked myself in the bathroom. I didn't expect the knock, 2 soft taps. Then his voice, "Alex, it's me." I opened the door without thinking. We stood there, inches apart, afraid to move. More afraid to stay still. Then he touched my face. Again, and I leaned into it. This time we didn't go to the guest room. We didn't hide. We went to my bedroom, the one I shared with my wife. I don't know why. Maybe because we'd already crossed every other line. Or maybe because part of us wanted to be found. This time, there was no slowness. The fire was already burning. Every kiss was deeper. Every breath more desperate. We clung to each other, trembling, gasping, completely lost. And when it ended, stayed tangled together, his fingers in my hair, my head on his chest. We were still like that when the bedroom door opened. Emily stood there, frozen, her eyes wide, her lips parted, her hands still on the knob. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't speak. She just stared. Then her face cracked, shock turning to pain. And she backed away, 1 step at a time. The sound of her sobbing shattered something. Inside me, I jumped out of bed, shouting her name, trying to explain the unexplainable. But it was too late. She didn't stop. She didn't turn. She vanished down the stairs, her sobs echoing like a song I'd never unhear. I collapsed to the floor, naked, ashamed, ruined, and I knew. This was the end, and the beginning of something I could never take back. The next morning, she didn't come home. I stayed up all night, sitting on the couch, still half-dressed, still in shock. Michael said nothing. He just dressed and walked out of the room like a man leaving a fire behind. I didn't follow. At dawn, crawled into bed, alone, her side untouched. At 7 a.m., Michael appeared in the kitchen. His shirt was wrinkled. I thought his face was drawn. He'd say something, anything, but he didn't. He poured a cup of coffee, stared out the window. "She's not coming back," I whispered. "I know," he said, and that was it. No yelling, no tears, just silence. A kitchen full of everything we broke. Later, Emily returned with her brother and a lawyer. She didn't even speak to me. She just handed me an envelope. "You have 24 hours, she said, her voice like stone. "And him," she added, nodding toward. "Michael, he needs to be gone too." We packed in silence. No begging. No explanations. By nightfall, we were gone. We didn't know where we were going. Just ... not here. We ended up in a cheap motel. Paper-thin walls. Flickering lights. Silence. I wanted to believe we still had each other, that maybe it was worth it, but something had changed in Michael. I could feel it. Yet how he pulled away when I touched him. In the silence after every question, it was like the fire had been smothered by shame. 3 days later, I woke up to an empty bed. He was gone. No note, no message, just silence. I stayed in that motel another week, paralyzed, ashamed. Eventually, the divorce papers came. Simple. Cold. Final. Emily didn't yell. Didn't argue. She just erased me. She kept the kids. The house. But the dog. I let her. What right did I have? Months passed. Drifted. Worked odd jobs. Tried to forget the sound of her voice when she caught us, but it never left me. Neither did Michael. I never heard from him again. I don't know if he went back to his life, or if he's out there now, haunted like I am. But I do know this. I could go back, ... I wouldn't undo it. I wouldn't pretend it didn't happen. Because for one night I felt seen, desired, alive. And that kind of truth. It leaves a scar. One you never want to heal. Now I ask you, what would you do when the damage is already done, ... and the only thing left is the ache of what can't be undone, ... Would you walk away? Or keep going? Knowing the world may never forgive. You ... tell me in the comments, because honestly, ... I don't know.